Alrighty, hello every folks, and good morning. Welcome to the full review here for Kingsvein. One of these just happy surprise projects that happened to come my way here. That I was extremely, but frankly, honored to review because the work ethic involved with seeing the work they put into their games is impressive. So let's go ahead and get started here. Now we're just going to go ahead and start off with a new game here and just start kind of gushing about everything about this game right from the get-go. So first and foremost, what even is this game? Bit of a long story, but what if I were to tell you basically had a combination of like Dark Souls exploration with Golden Sun puzzles, but it's also kind of like a Shining Force and a Tactics Ogre set in Morrowind. Like, it's something like that. Also, you're kind of playing as a Gumby person, so we're going to go ahead and play as a wizard in this case, a dark augur, as it were. Somebody that starts off with extra health and a lot of extra MP, but if they ever lose their MP, they instantly gain 50% of it back, but while they're above 10 MP, their damage reduces their MP instead of their HP. So they're basically going for a whole chaotic MP bar kind of thing. Anyway, let's go ahead and stylize this dude a little bit. Nice hat they got going on there. Let's go ahead and there we go. That's looking pretty wizardly over there. Just go ahead and yeah, silver armor, black hood. That's looking pretty stylish. Oh, actually, let's go ahead and leave him there. So I should point out, your main character starts off with 3 different archetypes that they start off with. You have your standard fighter kind of situation with a lot of extra health, and once per turn, if an enemy is knocked out, you end up getting an extra action, so a really good momentum fighter. Or the one that I did my first playthrough with, the Stalker, which gains extra movement and can turn invisible if they end up getting a kill. And then lastly, you have the Dark Augur here with the interesting health bar situation. So that's going to be us. We're being sent out on a solo mission. Not anymore, though. So, we are going to get the full introduction here in just a moment, but let's go ahead and customize our dinosaur. Go. We got this. So for our mount, so your wyvern is just going to give you extra health, extra MP, and that's pretty neat. Your winged, however, has a little bit less health, but they are able to jump over enemies courtesy of their tiny wings. Or we get the charger, who's able to move extra, but only in lines. So essentially, if you want a kind of like rook situation, we're going to go with a winged here because I ran with the standard wyvern here right from the get-go. And then we've got our 2 extras here. So let's see who we can go ahead and make. Let's see, we got some kind of beard situation going on here. Let's go ahead and... There we go, got like a bandana or something. You may notice the colors of these people are kind of weird. As I mentioned earlier, we're basically playing as Gumby people. So we're effectively partially made of rock and partially people. So in this case, they're made of corpus, essentially a noble type of stone here. Kind of like if steel came from one rock is the best way to describe it in this situation. So they get extra health, they get extra MP. Voltraced, they're melded with small amount of Volskern, which is another one of the minerals that you can potentially make stuff out of. Lots of extra MP, or junk stone, that they're made of general garbage, but they get extra experience. Personally, I think this one's probably one of the better ones, but you do you. So we'll go ahead and customize these guys up a little bit. This guy's screaming like a Leonard to me for some reason. There we go. You can recruit him in this route, and actually we'll just go ahead and make this one Aerosol then. Perfect. All right, let's go ahead and move on here. So start your. Is this your party? Hell yeah, it's our party, and it's one hell of a party. So. I will say, for years, I've been hearing about stuff like Alvora tactics, was it something Spiral, Void Spire or something, tactics, as well as especially Horizon's Gate. And every time I took a look at them, I'm like, oh, it's like I guess like a pixel RPG kind of thing. I figured it was going to be like a classic Final Fantasy clone or something along those lines, maybe something closer to a Shining Force or what have you. This is a totally different thing. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our infiltration here. We're basically starting off as a Vagrant Story protagonist. So we're going to go ahead and slap this dude, jump straight through a wall. Now, the interesting thing about this game is that it's not simply a matter of... I'm just going to go ahead and throw that guy straight off a cliff. So this isn't one of those games that's strictly about direct linearity. This is, believe it or not, a sort of Metroidvania strategy RPG hybrid thing with Golden Sun puzzles that also gives you free reign to explore however you will. Because you're not going around and trying to find specific progression items. Essentially what you're trying to do is upgrade your own skills as your means of getting around. So like you saw right there, that bash that we did, that just as easily works on other things. Actually, that furniture is going to be against the wall, so I'll show it later. But at any time, you can interact with anything in the world in the same way in combat as you can out of it. So here, we'll just go ahead and pick up some bandages here. You may notice the maneuvering that's going on here is very similar in feel to something like Ultima, except, you know, with way more energy, because you're, like, in universe, you're kind of a bit of a badass, so that's kind of the deal there. I have to say, it's funny, because early on I was a little bit curious about that particular reputation, because when my character was going and playing as a stealthy, sneaky sort, they kept getting knocked out pretty frequently. However, as soon as they finally started coming into their own with a complete dodge build to the point that they were dodging 70% of attacks, and it was at that moment that the NPCs were like, yeah, dude, we're just scared of you, how can we help? Like, it just felt very appropriate. The timing on everything, the overall flow of the game is, oh, it's nice. It's so nice. So, okay, what the hell are we even doing here? So, as it said in the intro, essentially that castle behind us is the capital of a kingdom that's gone silent, for reasons that no one's really clear on. These wisp things have seemingly shown up and started doing whatever the hell they feel like, and as a result, essentially stuff seems to be running amok. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and bash that dude over there, and we're going to go ahead and move this guy into position to deal with the units that he's about to spawn. So our backup has gone ahead and arrived, and there we go. Let's go ahead and ask them for help. I should point out there's a lot of dialogue options in this game. Most of them are for roleplay purposes, but there are some that actually will have different effects depending on your situation. So this game does a lot of unique stuff in terms of its overall gameplay feel here. So as long as your unit's turn order, which I should point out, this is basically turn-based with some asterisks. Technically speaking, this is kind of a free-flowing system in terms of people being able to move their turns up and down a little bit. However, in general, it's still your turn and then the enemy turn. When it's your turn, you don't have to worry about what order everyone ended up coming up in. You can just go ahead and kind of attack them as you will. You can use your triggers to go and swap between your different people to go make sure that you're taking the actions that you want to be taking. So we're going to go ahead and move you over here. We're going to have you run over here and attempt to throw this one off a cliff. Goodbye. I love that little whistling sound. We're going to have him step on this rubble here, and then we're going to have you go ahead and finish him off here as you were. There we go, we killed our first wisp, and we're going to go ahead and move on here. So we're going to skip through the dialogue a little bit here. You can make your own choices as you will. Bear in mind, the dialogue does change depending on the stuff that you say. There are a lot of different dialogue options, and as I said, most of them are going to be for roleplay purposes. So you will get completely different conversations and what have you. It may not necessarily change the trajectory of the fights, but you will get some fun stuff out of it. Okay. So, what I was mentioning earlier about the way that this game handles progression is that everything you do, again, can be used inside of combat and out of it. So these guys, technically speaking, we should be able to hit them. So, like, those guys over there were dead bodies that guy's wisps were supposed to go and essentially go and control. So, we're going to go ahead and take some of their items here, just go put them away. They're just going to be running some rusty equipment, so nothing too great. But essentially, everything, again, interacts in combat and out of it. I know I keep repeating the same thing, but there's a reason for it. Because, essentially, this means that this is a Metroidvania where you can progress wherever the hell you want, and it seems to adjust accordingly. Again, I can't emphasize enough how impressive it is that this is a one-man project. I mean, obviously with some asterisks, but, like, it's just insane that kind of thing is here. And you might think, it's going to be pretty easy then. You just go and you find your puzzle solution. You find your progress, you keep on going forward. Not quite. Not quite. So, first of all, do I have any casters on the team yet? No. Didn't start off with any casters this time around, so we're just going to go ahead and attempt to escape, because we're about to get frickin' ambushed. Also, as he mentioned there, we are in Graven. So that's the name of this place. This is kind of like an underground mushroom kingdom type situation. I say that because there's sentient killer mushrooms and whatever. So it's going to go ahead and zoom out of intro view here to let us know that we're going to want to escape here pretty soon. We're going to go ahead and hop on our mount, because we can get faster movement on account of being our mount. Quick, use your little flappy wings. Get us over there. We're not going to fight all those guys. Yeah, we're just going to stay silent. Why not? Help? Okay. Thank you, mysterious stranger. Alright, so they're going to go ahead and let that army pass through. Believe it or not, that's a puzzle for later. Anyway, so this entire world is interactable. Everything in it is essentially your oyster to tackle as you please. There are technically, as far as I've seen, only a small handful of progression items, and even those aren't actually kind of necessary for progression, as it were. Gotta love those animations here. This game's really punchy with its animations. You can tell that this is the 4th game that they've been going and using this particular engine, because they frickin' know what they are doing. Okay, so now we get into our first party fight here, so we'll go ahead and assign our people accordingly, move them over this way. Here, let's move you here, and move you over here. Alright, 2 things I want to note right away. Note the music. So the music is actually different depending in a lot of situations. Like, you might say this is just the battle music, but it's more than that. Essentially, whenever there's battles, it seems like they wanted to tackle all of the fights as sort of individual, almost boss fight type situations, where every fight that you run into is almost a boss fight and thing all of its own. Each one is supposed to teach you something. Each thing is supposed to have some kind of cool mechanic to it. So this means that every one of the tracks that you see will be specifically tailored to that situation. So it's not simply the battle music. There's like 4 or 5 different just general purpose battle themes and boss themes on top of that. This essentially means that in many cases it's kind of talking to you even in its music. So either way, that's just kind of fascinating to see. I personally like this particular track, but we're just going to go ahead and go for that. We're going to go ahead and bash for some additional damage right over there. We're going to go ahead and chompify this dude. And I think you're just going to go ahead and stay, and then you're going to go ahead and take a bite. This bite won't hit, by the way. I'm just doing it to show that the AI is actually pretty smart in this thing. So the AI will actually... Oh, except apparently I'm not. I'm just targeting empty tiles. So the AI, believe it or not, will adapt to and use your own traps, will use the environment, will use their own skills in creative ways. It's fascinating to see, like, the AI have that level of competence with things like, oh, you put your guy next to a statue, I'm going to go ahead and throw something at that statue to knock it over on top of that guy. Like, you'll love to see that kind of stuff, Okay, so in this case, you may notice that this one started off with a sort of almost spear Overwatch type situation. Let's go ahead and just have you fight this man normally. You're going to go ahead and just 1v1 this guy and actually finish him off this time, thank you. And you're going to go in this direction. Alright, so as I mentioned before, all of these items, or all of these skills will work the same way in combat and out of it. So, like, you notice that timed ability over there. That might be pretty hard to land. Like, if he's going and backing himself into a corner, sure, it's probably worth using, and there's ways to absolutely skyrocket its damage, but still, if the AI knows to avoid readied attacks coming your way, that's going to make it pretty difficult to finish them off with something like that, right? Turns out, not so much, because you, again, remember the same thing? I keep repeating like an annoying person. What am I saying like an annoying person? I am an annoying person. Anyway, so essentially, remember what I keep repeating here, that every one of these skills works the same way out of combat. So, for example, a readied sniper shot that's got an extremely long range with your, archer running some poisonous arrows and a bunch of debuff skills and stuff like that, that might be really hard to land in an actual fight, but if you, for example, were to notice that the encounter was there beforehand and snipe somebody out ahead of time, basically start off the fight going and using it that way, well, that's kind of some useful information, right? So the whole game is like this, that essentially you're going and discovering new bits and pieces to play around with and attempting to see how that'll end up interacting. Like, my first time through, I thought that this guy was supposed to come back from the dead and, like, run off, sneak off, and do the whole thing of, like, oh, I'm gonna come back and get you, or whatever else. So I noticed that you could push them around, and I also noticed that if you go over to the skills, you could go and pick up something like blood spikes in order to lay down some traps. So in her case, what I ended up going and doing is I ended up going and putting down some spikes, And then figured, you know what? There's no way that this guy's going to come back from. I'm not going to let this guy come back from a cutscene and, not suffer for it. So we're going to go ahead and just bash this guy onto some spikes. Funnily enough, he actually will go and slide over them because he's already dead. You actually can just select somebody to make their body disappear if and when they're there being dead for drama purposes. Funnily enough, this is actually an instanced kind of event here. So we're going to leave the battle map in just a moment, and we're going to go ahead and pick up this torch, and now it'll help us see a little bit better. And if we want to, we can actually go ahead and light other torches with it, and things like that. This is a extremely interactive game. Everything from your items to your skills to everything else can interact with the world and give you new options to play around with. This right here is also a mechanic, believe it or not, where resting at the end of the day is essentially how your people are going and bonding over the course of the game. Again, the dialogue will be changing depending on how you're talking and whatever else. Everyone will tell you about their day, and depending on the stuff that you do, how you tackle the game and what have you, they'll have little conversations about all the stuff that you've been up to. So why exactly would you need to rest? Well, again, you can explore this whole world as you will. So this means that they needed a bit of a downside. So if any of your people are downed at any point, they don't die permanently, as far as I'm aware. You essentially have your starting party that's going to be there with you for pretty much the entire game. So these are just your buddies. These are the people you're going to be hanging out with the whole time, and they're going to have stories to tell. But this means that if anybody ends up ever getting downed, they actually lose some of their maximum health and MP, which you need for a lot of things. So effectively, what this ends up coming down to is that you'll eventually need to come back here and rest in order to get your party back up to full strength. So in this case, just to give you another idea of how much things are interactable, we can just go ahead and put up this torch, go ahead and light up this torch, go ahead and just kind of go through this stuff, pick up a little bit of a cape here, give ourselves a little bit more dodge. Nothing in this one. Just to point this out, technically you can also break just about everything too if you wanted to. It's just one of those things where there's not necessarily always a reason to do that. In this case, I just went ahead and threw the thing over there, which could potentially be useful. Kind of curious. Technically, I should be able to knock that off the edge. Oh, I guess technically there's gravel in the way. That's why. Fine, I guess I won't throw it off the edge. But yeah, you can be an absolute clown going and playing this game. But again, since everything is more or less freeform, you can do all of that as you will. In this case, this whole area is basically your Firelink Shrine, right? That you'll go and you'll end up getting additional people here. You'll end up getting additional functions to the space, and this is where you come back to rest. So you come back to recuperate. You come back to do as you will. Potentially get new facilities and what have you. And as they're mentioning in this conversation right here, you can tackle everything in whatever manner you want. For example, there's a very, very useful item if you were to go that way. Actually, there's several things that you could discover going that way, but you can explore anything in whatever order you wish. Because as I mentioned before, and I know I keep repeating this, your combat skills are also your in-world skills. So let's say over here, we want to make sure that we don't exactly want to be running into too many issues fighting these guys. So we're going to go ahead and put down some spikes here as a little bit of a trap. We're going to go ahead and put those in his way. He's not terribly aggressive, again, unless you're getting super close. They're not going to be too worried about us. Let our MP recover a little bit, and we'll go ahead and throw some over there. So they've gone ahead and noticed us, and now the fight's actually going to go ahead and start proper. Alright, so let's go ahead and select you, and let's go ahead and put down some spikes here. So now I'm going to show you how you can actually make use of those timed abilities I was talking about earlier. So, if we were to, let's say, go over here and attack this guy, we're going to let this guy get overwhelmed, as it were. Because I actually just noticed the guy that I want to have using that timed ability is not in the right position to do so. Probably should have done something about that sooner, but oh well. So, we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to have this guy go ahead and mount the dragon here. And yeah, we're going to let them approach, potentially run into our spikes. We'll see how that goes. As you can see, the AI will actually be aware of traps and try to avoid it. But if they have no way to actually get to you, and or if the way is way too difficult for them to navigate, they will actually go ahead and change their entire plans and just go ahead and attack you. So this leads to a lot of very interesting traversal type of puzzles. So we're going to go ahead and use this mount over here to walk over this direction. Currently, he's unable to attack, or rather, he's currently unable to use his flight ability because he has somebody sitting on him. But yeah, just so you're aware, actually, you stay exactly where you are. Sorry, got a little bit distracted there. But the AI, again, will know to avoid your traps. It'll try to use your own traps against you. It's surprisingly smart in terms of the stuff that it does. So we're not really getting a whole lot of benefits out of our traps here, so we're going to try to make some better use of them in a moment. So just go ahead and throw this guy in the water for the time being. Funnily enough, some enemies can drown, some of them can't. It's up to you to kind of figure this stuff out. Yeah, this door is one of those early game puzzles that I'm ashamed to admit took quite a long time. And as you can see right here, the mount and the person are entirely individual. So, for example, if you combine your mount and your rider, you effectively can create a situation where the mount is moving for them. The mount can actually learn a lot of different abilities, and effectively the two can become one there, with the mount serving basically as their additional health bar. So this just leads to a lot of interesting scenarios. Like, strategically speaking, this game is absolutely top-notch with just how many things can potentially interact. So many things that oftentimes can be kind of standard assumptions of like, oh, this is the damage move, this is, a bad thing, or what have you. A lot of that stuff can be twisted on its head through your interactions with different abilities. Take, for example, those timed abilities. Very difficult to land, however, there are several abilities that will, for example, give you, additional, stuff like additional defense whenever going and using those timed abilities. Or, if you wanted to create your own auto abilities from Tactics Ogre Reborn, effectively what you can do is, let's say you add in this defense boost for automatic skills, right? And then, let's say you want to also add in the ability to land a debuff whenever using a timed spell. So you can create effectively a situation where you're going and intentionally putting yourself in a sort of compromised position in order to go and, well, change the situation around you. In order to have somebody be near immortal and potentially going and dropping a bunch of free debuffs for you. So there's a lot of interactions between your different skills. So every class... I should probably explain this first. Every class essentially has 3 categories. They have 2 that they spend experience on. Experience is the one that I would recommend actually going and sort of stocking up for a little bit. Because experience is something that's technically harder to come by. Effectively, like, you have your stat points over here, and you have your skill points over here. So you don't really level up in the traditional sense. Whenever a fight ends, you'll gain experience. Sometimes you'll also gain ability points. So like right here, they ended up getting 1 point in this particular category. I could save it for later to, for example, get additional damage with these types of attacks, or I can go ahead and spend it for some extra MP. But at the same time, you have stuff like passives. So like, let's say if you land on a tile that gives you a buff of some variety, they would end up keeping it around for a couple turns, or they might do additional damage with these particular elements if they're attacking nearby enemies, or let's say they end up going and drawing power from blood pools. You might have noticed over the course of that fight there was blood showing up on the ground. That's actually also a mechanic. It not only can potentially be frozen, it can also be electrified, it can also be exploded. It potentially has a lot of interesting interactions. So everything interacts in some way. Like the kind of gameplay loop of this game here. So we're just going to go ahead and scout near the tower. We can ask for more information, but we're just not doing that yet. Anyway. So we're just going to scout, and we're going to see if we can move this rock. Okay, well, that doesn't really necessarily help us out that much. Let's go ahead and throw it off here. Let's go ahead and, break open this thing, and we see that we found a rock here. So right now, we're just going around and scavenging. So I might have mentioned earlier that there's a little bit of Dark Souls in here. So effectively, think of these run-up areas as if you were in a Dark Souls type zone, and the fights that you run into are basically your boss fights. So the puzzles that are kind of Golden Sun-esque will be there to let you know that, okay, you're going, you're exploring, you're doing all that kind of thing. But at the same time, if you end up going and you see a bunch of heavily armed people standing around in an intimidating mob, then there's a pretty decent chance they probably don't have very good intentions for your face. So you can have different things kind of show up for you. different options show up for you. So, like, let's say in this case, I'm looking over there, I see he's got 65 out of 80 experience to go get this pole chain, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use this essence pebble over here to go ahead and give him a little bit of extra experience, and I'm going to go ahead and use that to go over to this chisel class, and I'm going to go ahead and forget that I forgot to change him into this class. Okay, cool. Who actually is the chisel then? Let's go ahead and see who's got a pulling ability here. Okay, so two things I actually want to point out while I'm going and correcting the mistake I just did. For one thing, you can upgrade your skills, so what you see is not necessarily what you get. So for example, the bash starts off at 30%, however, every time that you go and rank it up, it adds an additional 20%, and you can rank this up several times. Say something like this bite, it will do 250% damage, but at the same time, if you were to go and rank it up, it would do a bit more every time. Every skill is like this, and in many cases you may potentially get additional range and things like that whenever going and using them. So in this case, we're actually going to go ahead and ambush this guy. Let's see, we've got you, who should be able to learn a flame spell here. So we're going to go ahead and learn flame. I'm going to go ahead and check out our range with this. So we're currently at 3 tiles of range. And we see that he's kind of wandering about. So let's see if he decides to patrol into this area here. Do you want to go a little bit higher, buddy? Go up 1. I was a little bit slow in the draw there. But anyways, as you get additional range, you can actually go and ambush units in all kinds of different ways. Up to and including, for example, mining the entire area with a bunch of different traps, and then going and launching an earthquake into a crowd. So there's a lot of interactions as far as that goes. So just so you're aware, again, everything is interacting both in the game and out of it. So like right here, the fireball might be useful for going and damaging this guy directly. At the same time, that same fireball could potentially be usable to, you know, light a furnace, or, you know, make an entire area lit up or whatnot. There's a lot of ways for you to interact with the world. I know I keep reiterating that same point, but I cannot emphasize how good this feels, because you're not simply using your progression for the purpose of damage or what have you. You're not doing that basic stuff there. You are literally going and deciding your route through the game depending on your skills. Effectively, this almost takes an Metal Gear Solid 5 approach to your actual skill unlocks and things like that, where they're like, look, you have an objective over in this direction. Realistically speaking, like, you can accomplish that however you decide to. So, you know, maybe something to consider. So there we go. We went ahead and got our stuff unlocked. I'm going to go ahead and go to the guy that actually remembered to go change into the right class this time, and go ahead and, let's say, unlock something like the chain. Because not only can you push things, you can also pull things. Your spells potentially, like if you look over your spells, like just from your basic classes, I'm gonna try not to spoil stuff here, because just going and having those big aha moments of just figuring out where you can potentially puzzle out a new solution here is such a massive dopamine rush for this game. So like right here with this burst ability on your starting caster, that effectively means that you can go push something around. It doesn't have to be people. That can be a lot of different things, okay? Things have different interactions all over the place. So just bear that in mind, that this is not your traditional Metroidvania, this is not your traditional RPG. Everything is potentially a mechanic. Like right over here, like just the fact that we can actually go ahead and hit this thing down here could potentially give us new traversal options. Maybe shouldn't jump into fire, but still, now this fight that was over there, we can now potentially go and use these traps that are already set up over here. We might be able to use this as a choke point, or we might be able to just bypass the fight entirely and come back to it later. We see that there's that guy over there. I already know that he's going to go ahead and run off, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave him be. So we're just going to go ahead and kind of sneak around, kind of determine our approach. I should point out that this right here, this is a very important item. This is where you get your MP restoring liquor. So yeah, you basically have one MP restoration item that for the most part here. And for the most part, it's going to be these. So as soon as your cups are empty, you go back, you refill your cups. So just kind of good stuff there. I believe there's actually a fight behind this door, if I'm not mistaken. maybe I'm mistaken. Okay, there was a guy in here last time, I thought. But anyway, we see that there's a lantern right here. It is currently unlit. We'll just go ahead and use our fireball to light it. And now we've got somebody else going and carrying around a torch. Snazzy. And again, you just kind of keep doing this and going and figuring out new mechanics. There is no, like, right progression, because this is just a journey of mechanical discovery, where you're going and figuring out new ways that things interact, new potential creative uses for the stuff that was already there, which probably does not include taking a sword and stabbing your own friend in the face. But still, like, you keep note of all of these, different things, like, why is this looking slightly different? Like, what's with this hole? What's with this kind of tile over here? And what's even better is that you have the R3 function over here, which will essentially give you, it'll essentially give you a bunch of information on anything. You can highlight anything and it'll tell you more. It'll tell you who the diecast are, essentially being Gumby people. It'll tell you who the Scurio are, who's this little fox guy. It'll tell you how rocks work. It'll tell you how explosives work. Explosives are a thing. As you may have noticed earlier, it mentions that certain chunk stone, so for example these ones, if they're in small enough amounts, can actually be blown up. That's kind of interesting information. I wonder if that might be useful later. Again, everything is potentially a puzzle. You're constantly going to be backtracking through these old areas and just going and rethinking your approach. You don't necessarily need to come back with a progression item. In fact, there's very few progression items in this game, surprisingly enough. But there are quite a few just interesting uses of a lot of your different items. So, like, for example, I mentioned earlier that we're basically playing as claymation Gumby people. So we have this thing over here that is essentially a one-time use. Here, let's go ahead and mouse over it real quick. So one-use organic throwable that deals damage. That's all well and good, but if we look at its description, it's a small orb found within the soil. It has a fragile, fleshy exterior that releases its sharp, spiny interior on impact. Properly prepared, its innards can actually have healing properties, but it's more commonly used as a projectile. And so, for example, if you were to wrap this into a bandage, then you would have a poultice, which is going to be a better healing item. You actually specifically even have one of these houses that I was hoping to run into an accident here, that even goes out of its way to point this out to you. So, just so you know, everything's potentially mechanic. I'm not even showing you my later game save file, just because any random thing being used in a particular way can potentially be seen as a spoiler. Like, just every new skill is potentially a new interaction. Every new class unlock is potentially a new bit for you to go and explore, you know? A lot of skills will go and give you effects that you may not initially think will be relevant. Like I mentioned earlier, with those, like, something like Bide, it may be really difficult to pull off damage-wise. I mean, sure, it's a ton of damage if you can, like, say, knock somebody into that particular location. Like, just like something like Tactics Ogre, if you have a shield, you already have your bashing ability without having the bash ability. You can just go shield bash somebody. But every new thing that you interact with can potentially give you something more, and eventually it just starts getting you in this mindset of, like, you know, I'm looking at all these things, like, why are these rocks nearby the walls? Maybe there's something underneath them, you know? Maybe there's something more to these areas. Maybe there's a, invisible wall that I can potentially go through. And what's nice is that there is so much restraint shown on the part of the developer in this game, because as you go through, you'll notice more and more that it's very mechanically dense, but it's never overwhelming. And it's very impressive that they managed to pull it off like that. Everything is potentially another mechanic. Just going and retrying new skills on, old stuff or what have you might completely change the way that you're traversing particular areas. And this area, this whole game just feels very good to traverse. I want to point out that actually I would have gotten this review out a lot sooner if I hadn't just gotten completely just stuck exploring, because I was going and exploring and re-exploring the starting area, completely missing that there was an entire second half to the map I'd never even seen. There is way more than you might think packed into all these areas. It's very, very mechanically dense. With every new area potentially being a new discovery, potentially being a new thing that you can do, it's just really impressive, So one thing I will point out, actually, it's the sort of elephant in the room here. When it comes to to playing on the Steam Deck, this actually plays perfectly on the Steam Deck. I would almost argue that it's optimal to play on the Steam Deck, because this just took me back to the Golden Sun days, man. just took me back to going and spending a lot of time going and solving puzzles and what have you, or going and trying to traverse areas for cool accessories that are amazing. Hint, hint. And like there's just something around every corner. Now, I haven't played the rest of this series yet. I intend to at the soonest opportunity. But just, yeah, you explore in every direction, you get new skills, you reevaluate your situation. Sometimes, you walk into areas and just find all kinds of unexpected things. Like, it would be cool to get into that area back there. I mean, maybe we'll figure that out in a moment. But for the time being, I see that there's an anvil, and I have a weapon. And if I were to, let's say, select the anvil, we can see that I can augment weapons. So, like, let's say I go ahead and I go into my equipment here, and I see that I can pick up my sword, I can put it over here, I can pick up this spike, I can slot it in there, and now I have a 60% chance to do additional damage. Or, for example, say that there's a weapon over here. You can always go throw it into the furnace to turn it back into its base metal and stuff like that. So there's so much to this traversal, so much to potentially unpack in terms of the movement, in terms of just fun things you can do. And again, everything's a piece of the puzzle. Every little bit and piece is a piece of the puzzle. It feels like there's no throwaway areas. So, I mean, that's all I wanted to say here. This is a very unique experience. It's a game that you can clearly tell was made with an insane amount of passion, and despite the fact that there's so many mechanics flying around, that there's so many little things to interact with, you would think that there would be some bugs somewhere. I kid you not, I found one way to potentially break the game in the course of the last 40 hours. One, and it was basically patched the next day. So not only are they extremely on top of it, they are extremely fast in terms of fixing things, and also extremely extremely good at listening to the community. Because while, again, I don't want to get into spoiler territory here, many of the abilities that the different classes have are actually reworked from earlier games in the series, meaning that they will potentially, like, some old skills became accessories, some accessories became skills, stuff was shifted around, and you will occasionally see things in your, like, every class, I forgot to mention this earlier, every class actually has unique stuff over here in terms of their the stats that they can go and invest in. And they're also actually individual for that class. So, for example, if this guy is gaining experience as a war beast, every now and then they will get a point that they can spend over here. But if they were to go switch to a different class later, they actually would end up potentially getting something completely different over there. The skill points are, again, kept to the class. The experience points are kept as that class. But yeah, you progress as you will. And it's funny because the fights go from, like, oh no, there's a fight in my way, to actively you're going around seeking out fights because it's like, man, I need that experience because I want more skills to play around with, because I want more progression, I want to go and break more puzzles, I want to go and break more fights, give me that experience, something's gonna die. So, that kind of stuff is great to see. But as I was trying to show earlier, you see a lot of things, potentially inspirations from other games that are just handled better here, which is, again, impressive how often that this happens. Something like regeneration, for example, is basically that one perk that nobody took in XCOM Enemy Unknown, where you gain additional healing when you are healed. In something like that, you never knew who was getting healed, so it wasn't necessarily a big deal. In this case, you have so many different types of healing available to you, like whether you have somebody that specializes in nature magic, putting a plant down that essentially regenerates somebody sitting on top of it, or you're using your poultices, or you're potentially going and using your any number of other healing things. Like, one of my favorite classes was a sort of command-orientated class that reminded me a lot of the Ogre Battle 64 Centurion, of all things, just allowing them to give commands to other people. I don't want to get into more specific stuff, but the fact that you could attach a banner to your spear to have it heal instead of hurt allies, I just love little touches like that. There's so much creativity oozing through the pores of every little pixel in this thing. So, I gotta get going. I could go on ranting on like this for hours about every little thing. I'm just constantly trying to check myself to avoid, getting into spoiler territory or something and ruining it for someone, because these discoveries feel so good to get done. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave it there. I'm going to have a beginner's guide coming out separately. I intended to have it come out alongside this video, but I've had anything from car issues to the snowpocalypse outside to random wild animals trying to attack our pets. So, like, I've been dealing with a lot of stuff on my plate. So I'm trying to get all those done at the same time. Anyway, so go ahead and give this thing a look. Like, this is one of those ones, don't just wish list it. Pick it up. Seriously. You won't regret it. Like, this is one of those ones that this one will be one that I know I'm going to be coming back to. Every reviewer that I talked to that was also reviewing this thing is already going into new runs just to try out new stuff that they didn't try the first time. There's technically less classes than last time, but there's still enough for multiple playthroughs of just completely not even touching several classes. I know I'm almost at the very, very, very end of the game on my main save, and there's probably 4 or 5 classes I've yet to explore in any degree whatsoever. So either way, it's really, really, really good as far as that goes. And if you're paying attention to side quests and things, you will actually notice that there's a lot of little side quests here and there. It's not going to note anything for you. Again, you can actually even go into your journal and write your own notes down for these side quests and what have you. But everything that you look into, it'll go ahead and tell you about. This game loves telling you how everything works, and you don't see that very often. Like, it's like, hey, tell me about flails. Okay, they can attack diagonally? Fantastic. What about a ruined book? You got anything to say on that? Oh, apparently nothing to say on the ruined book. Fine. But how about doors? I want to know about doors. Fantastic. What about windows? Can you tell me about windows? Maybe not that window. But what about an empty mug? Surely you have something to say about that. I don't know, but well, tell us about Stockweave, which in this case we can actually go ahead and... Oh, they have theirs already put down. It's like Stockweave, you can take scissors to turn into bandages, and then combine with rocks to make poultices. Okay, whatever. Anyway, trying not to get into spoilers and things over what does what. Again, incredible game. Incredible game. You should really check it out. I plan to go check out every other thing that this developer has done, because this is crazy impressive. Like, you'd think something with this many interactions would have some sort of issues. But there's that peace of mind that so far every single one of hundreds of puzzles so far has never once been a case of a glitch, but has always been a case of just not approaching the problem in the right way. And I love that peace of mind when going and playing a game like this. So, to me, this is the Golden Sun 3 we never got. So, to me, that makes me incredibly happy. Also, I guess it just also was partially a Tactics Ogre and also kind of a Dark Souls kind of experience. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and head out. Y'all have yourselves a good one, and take care.